Okay, hello and welcome. This is going to be our third tutorial in our Intro to SolidWorks tutorial series. I'm going to be starting with a new file in this one, so let's just follow along. I'm going to go to File and New. I'm going to create a part file. Go to OK. And in the last couple tutorials, I showed you how we're going to be creating 2D sketches, and then hopefully in the future we'll be adding three-dimensional features to those sketches. And so what we're just learning about in this tutorial is just kind of the basics of sketching in SolidWorks. And one of the basic fundamental ideas of sketching in SolidWorks is that you have to sketch on something. You can't just sketch in midair. So in SolidWorks we like to sketch on a plane, and we have three planes to choose from: the front plane, top plane, and right plane. And in the last tutorial I was sketching on the top plane, and so let's just go ahead and do that again. So in order to sketch on a plane, you go and do a right click on the plane you want to sketch on and just go up here to this button right here. It's called Sketch. And when you activate a sketch on a plane, it brings this plane normal to your view. So that means you're looking directly at it. This concept of looking at something normal to, or looking directly at it, is really important in SolidWorks, so pay attention to that. And you can tell that we have now activated this sketch on this plane because if you look up here in the right hand corner, we've got these two little buttons here, which are your exit sketch buttons. And just seeing those at all shows us that we're now inside of a sketch. So that's good to notice. And so let's go ahead and let's make some drawings here. Let's do a sketch. Let's go up here to our sketch tab of our command manager, and I'm going to grab the rectangle tool. And I'm going to go out here to the origin and hover over the very origin of the plane. Click once to define the center of this rectangle, and then I'll click again to define the edge. And you can see that I've got my rectangle tool is kind of stuck to the end of my cursor, so I've got to drop that tool now to move on. So I'll hit escape to drop the tool. And now, as we talked about in some of the other tutorials, we see a number of things. We see some of these constraints that are on this rectangle. These constraints hold these lines in the position that they are. So these are horizontal lines. They are held in place with a horizontal constraint. These are vertical lines. They are held with a vertical constraint. We also see that this sketch is blue, which means it's undefined. It doesn't have any dimensions on it, so that means that I can grab it with my cursor and I can just pull it and twist it into any shape that I want. Alternatively, if I add dimensions to it, it will then be held in place by those dimensions. So let's try that. I'm going to go up here to my Smart Dimension tool, and I'm just going to add some dimensions to this. So I'll click one line and click another line, and I'll just change this to 6. Click the top line and the bottom line, change this to 4. And now you see, because I've added these dimensions, my sketch is now black. I'm still holding on to the sketch, or to the sketch dimension, the Smart Dimension tool. So I have to drop that tool to show you this next part. So I'll hit escape. Now that the sketch is fully defined and is turned black because of these two dimensions, when I try to grab that edge, I can't move it anymore. So now this sketch is fixed in space because of these dimensions. So moving on from there, I want to show you guys about how we can make a shape that's a little bit more exciting. And one way is to combine this rectangle with some other line work. And then we're going to be using our trim tool to trim away some of that line work to create a shape that's a little bit more fun to look at. So let's do that. So I'm just going to draw another sketch over the top of this rectangle. I'm going to grab my line tool, and I'm just going to make like a lightning bolt sort of shape here, right through the center of that sketch. Not center, but just right through it. And then you can see that it's stuck to my cursor now, so I'll hit escape to drop the tool. And let me move this around a little bit. I'm going to grab the top of this line and just put it right there, probably. And so there's our line tool. So let me talk about the line tool for a little bit. Here it is. Now if I click on this drop down menu right here, you see that SolidWorks has two different types of lines that it can draw. One's the standard line that we just did. It's that big fat blue one. And then there's a center line, which is a construction line. or it's also in SolidWorks known as reference geometry. It's a type of line that's used just for reference or to activate a tool. It's not used for building. So let me show you what it's like. I'm going to click on Centerline, and we'll just add a centerline for this rectangle and this new line that we've drawn. So we've been building off of our origin so far, so we'll continue to do that. And if I start on the origin and just scroll up, I get this nice little dotted line to tell me I'm still in line with the origin. So I'll click once, and then I'll click again to just drop a center line right down the middle of all of our sketches. And you can see the center line tool is still, it's stuck to my cursor, so I got to escape, drop the tool. And so there you go. So that's a center line. So it's dotted and dashed, and it's a little bit thinner, lightweight than the standard line tool. And now we can use that as a center line for what we want to get. So I want to show you guys about this tool here. It's Trim Entities, and this does exactly what it says. It trims entities. It trims sketches. So right now we have 3 sketches all sitting on top of each other. We've got our original rectangle, we've got this lightning bolt, and then we've got this center line, and we want to trim away a bunch of this stuff to be left with a shape that's a little bit more fun. So let's click on Trim Entities, and we see that there are 5 different kinds of trim tools in SolidWorks. There's trim to closest, trim away outside, trim away inside, trim away corner, and then there's power trim. You can look at all these 4 on your own if you want. They are all pretty self-explanatory as to what they do, but we're going to be using power trim for this because it's definitely the one that I think you'll be using most often. So the way it works with power trim is you click and drag, and when you drag, you get this little gray line that follows your cursor anywhere that it goes, and anywhere that you hit with this gray line will get trimmed away. So as you see, I just go ahead and draw a line over the sketches that I want to get rid of, and it just trims everything away just like that. So I've got some more line work in here I want to get rid of. I'll just trim those pieces away, and there you go. Now I'm trying to give you guys an example of the trim tool, and so the only part of the original rectangle that we left behind was this line here, and we could have drawn that in pretty easily, but just for the purposes of this example, I thought I'd show you guys this way. Now up here in the right hand corner, we've got a green checkbox. That's SolidWorks just asking us to confirm that we like the trim operation we just made, so we'll hit yes to confirm. And there you go. Okay, so now we've got this leftover line work, which is a combination of several different sketches that we put over the top of each other, and then we trimmed them away. And we can do a couple of things now. I think what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to mirror it over to the other side. And so let's look at this button here that's called Mirror Entities. Now with Mirror Entities, you see when you select the tool, SolidWorks opens up the property manager for that tool and gives us a little suggestion on how to use the tool. It says, hey, please select entities to mirror and select a sketch or a linear model to mirror about. So looking down here in the options box, we've got this blue box here. Because it's blue, I know it's ready to accept my input. So it's saying, please select entities to mirror. So I'll just select the lines that I want to mirror. And it'll be this one, this one, this one, and this one. And as you see, as I clicked each one of those, it adds them into that box. Then you look down here even further, there's mirror about. So I'll click inside of that box and I'll select the line that I want to mirror about. And that's going to be the center line that we added before. I'll click that one and boom, it mirrors it right over. Now it's still yellow, which means that SolidWorks is still waiting for me to confirm that I like that operation it just performed for me. So I'll go over here to the green checkbox and say confirm, I like that. And so now we have this perfectly mirrored object creating an arrow. So that's fun. Now we've got our center line going down the center, and this center line holds some very important information, and what it holds is a bunch of constraints about our item. So these constraints here are symmetric constraints. We've talked before about horizontal constraints, vertical constraints. We've talked about these ones here, which are coincident constraints, and these ones are symmetrical constraints. They are the ones that are telling this sketch that it is a symmetrical sketch because we mirrored it. We know that the distance, that this point is the same as this point over here. And the thing that holds all those constraints is this center line. So like if I were to delete that center line, you notice all those constraints go away. And now I can move one side of this sketch and the other side won't move. So I'm just going to go undo and go undo again and bring that center line back into play, because that center line holds a bunch of constraints that we need to keep this sketch in a symmetrical way. So now if I drag one of these, you see that those symmetrical constraints will keep the sketch symmetrical no matter what I do to one side, it happens on the other. Okay, so there we go. So we want to keep that center line where it's at. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about constraints. We can add constraints and remove constraints all we want. It's totally flexible. So looking at this arrow, I've got kind of like this angled arrow thing going on, and let's pretend maybe that I want to make this line horizontal. I know I've got this line is let's pretend I want to make this line vertical. I know I've got this line which is horizontal. Let's pretend I want to make this one vertical. Super easy. I want to add a vertical constraint to this line. So I'll do a right click on that line, and I'll scroll all the way to the top here to this little box full of icons, and you can see there's one here that's called Make Vertical. So I'll click on that, and it's going to add a vertical constraint to that line. And because I have this center line holding this symmetrical constraint, you can see that because I made this one vertical, it makes that one vertical also. Okay? So all very important stuff. Using constraints to your advantage is something you always want to do in SolidWorks. So everything's feeling good. I have this nice arrow. I have this center line which holds all of these symmetrical constraints, holding the thing in a symmetrical way. I'm feeling pretty good about this. I think I'm ready to exit my sketch and move on. So now I'll exit my sketch. I'm still looking normal too, so I'm still looking directly at this sketch. So let me just use some of my navigation tools to get back out into the real world. So I'll do a right click and I'll drag. There's my side view. I'll drag up and to the right to go into a perspective view. And then I'll just click anywhere in the cloud there to get back to my standard part file. And I'm feeling good. I'll use my middle mouse button to sort of zoom around and take a look at this thing in 3D space. And this is great. So there we go, guys. We've done a lot in this tutorial, okay? It's a long one, but we've learned a little bit about the Sketch tab of the Command Manager and some of the funnest features of it. We used some of our sketch tools to overlap some sketches, and we used our Trim Entities tool to combine those sketches together. And then we used our Centerline tool to activate our Mirror Entities tool and mirror some sketches together. And then we learned a little bit about sketch constraints and how they can work to our advantage to creating nice symmetrical sketches and drawings. So don't forget, at any point you can always go back in. Even though you've exited all the way out to your part file, you can always go back into the sketch and you can look normal to your sketch like that. And you can do a right click again and go to Edit Sketch, and you'll have the opportunity to edit this sketch in any way that you want. And then you can exit that sketch and get right back to where you started. So there we go. In our next tutorial, we'll add some 3D features to this thing, and we'll take a look at some of the 3D work that SolidWorks can do, and that is the meat of it. We're going to have a lot more fun coming up, so stay tuned. Thanks a lot.